What's your take?
Well, I'm going to wait for the audience vote because I think it was pretty much a draw, no killer blow. Both turnbacks was a bit of a blow, though. I'll get to that in a minute. I'll play that in a second. But I felt Anthony Albanese didn't fall over. We thought after his unemployment rate gaffe he might. So that's a bonus for him. He seems to have, though, a plan for a plan. You know, there's not those big sort of policies when you're trying to get into government to point to how the country will change, and I think that will go over the head of a lot of people. I was surprised to hear him talk about the Federal Integrity Commission up front. I thought that was kind of a Teal independence seat issue.
Yeah.
And yet we had a couple of audience questions about
right,
it.
yeah.
We've had, so really interesting to see that people either are in favour of a federal ICAC or want federal politics cleaned up a bit. But Scott Morrison was quite clever here on the boat turnbacks. He asked Albanese a question, he took that licence, and he said, well, when you were Deputy PM, you weren't in favour of them. You might have done the offshore program, but not the turnbacks. Have a listen.
Why didn't you support turnbacks then?
You weren't proposing then.
No,
you were not proposing.
I'm sorry, we were. It was our policy.
You were not
Turnbacks were our policy before the 2013 election. I was the shadow immigration minister. I designed the policy.
But why is it, Scott, that you're always looking for a division, not looking for
No, I'm just looking for the accuracy and the truth.
Well, the truth is we support boat turnbacks.
But you didn't when you were Deputy Prime Minister and the boats were coming at 30 and 40 a week.
And we'll do it. What we did was we established offshore processing.
But there were a couple of, I thought, awkward moments for Scott Morrison. One is the parent of the child with autism. He said, I've been blessed with my two children. The parent who has an autistic child's been blessed too. I think that will be criticised by some people. He didn't mean any harm by that, Scott Morrison. I'm not suggesting that. The other was what I thought was a slight overreach on the China front. Obviously, he's happy to make this kind of overreach, Scott Morrison, but he says here, and we'll listen to this, he says Labor is on China's side. When all Labor has been doing, all Albanese's been doing is saying he should have sent the Foreign Minister to the Solomons to stop the agreement between the Solomon Islands and China. And Anthony Albanese here calls it an outrageous slur.
What I don't understand is that when something of this significance takes place, why would you take China's side?
That's an outrageous slur from the Prime Minister, and it shouldn't be. National security issues shouldn't be the subject of that sort of slur. This isn't so much a Pacific step up, it's a Pacific stuff up.
Finally, Kieran, I wanted to show this attempted psych out by Scott Morrison before the People's Forum. We know Anthony Albanese, he's been under pressure over remembering figures, etc. He didn't have a problem. Here's the Instagram pic. I haven't been rehearsing in a room. I've got so much time. I had a swim this afternoon, Kieran.
Andrew, thank you. Peter Credlin, what was your take? How did the two leaders go in your view?
Well, I think the format's the winner tonight more than the two leaders. I don't think there was any major stuff-ups from either of them. Anthony Albanese obviously had a lower bar. There wasn't any great knockout blows either. I do think the questions favoured the Labor leader. There were questions on the Integrity Commission, as we've talked about. There was questions on the NDIS. It enabled Albanese to get some line and length on policy detail. I do think at points in the debate he was hanging on tight. I think Scott Morrison made a real effort to explain things to people. I mean, you can talk all the policy insider talk you like, but unless punters watching at home and in the room can follow what the government's done, he's not winning any points. I think that he did that very well. I think the PM's tone was knocked down a few pegs tonight. I think the smugness wasn't there. I thought he did a very good job on that. But for me, the biggest turning point was two parts of the national security defence debate. The boat turnbacks issue that you just talked about there, Andrew Clennell, incredibly important. And the response from Albanese, you know, why are you pushing this division, Scott? Well, I'm pushing this division, says Scott Morrison, because we were absolutely divided on this policy issue for many years. And the other one was a China point. And there is a big difference between Labor and the Liberal Party on China. And there's a legacy very much in the New South Wales Labor Party, and you can't walk away from that.
Andrew Bolts, great to have you with us as well. What's your read on the events here at the Gabba?
Well, I think this was the debate that could have ended Albanese's campaign really early if he'd stuffed up like he'd stuffed up at the first week of the campaign. He didn't do that. I think he would come out of that thinking he'd done very well, and I do think he did very well. He was warmer. I was struck by the fact that so many questions were, what are you going to do on housing, on the NDIS, on electric cars? What are you going to do? Most of the Prime Minister's answers were, what have we done? And I think voters actually give you points for what you're going to do for them next. So I think Albanese won the sort of battle for the future a lot more. The Prime Minister, yes, was very on top of his facts. He couldn't help tell us all sorts of facts, including how many pages there were in the legislation for his Integrity Commission. I mean, it's just a blizzard of facts. But I think a lot of that might have gone straight over people's head, but leaving them perhaps with the idea that he's in command you might not like him, but he's in command. I do think, though, the one stuff up, and there was only one knockout, well, not knockout blow, but one big blow, was the question on boats that we've already played, where Albanese is sitting there with a mouthful of teeth not knowing what to answer about why did he oppose the boat turnbacks when he was Deputy Prime Minister. And the reason that's going to hurt is that it's easy to play, like we just did. It'll play on news bulletins. It's the grab from an otherwise a debate where not many people would have got many talking points out of it. So it's going to hurt him that way. But I think Albanese probably, look, I'd give it 50-50, but given how it's going to play in their respective campaigns, I take this as a win for Albanese. He'd come out of there thinking, I did well, because he looked warm, he was talking about the future, and he looked on top of his brief.
We've got Graham Richardson with us. Richo, you've seen many debates, many people's forums. How did you rate that and the performance of the leaders?
Well, there were no knockout blows. I don't think anyone hit the canvas. So I think, if you're looking for that big shocking moment, it didn't come. And I don't think there was any clear winner. But that in itself is a triumph for Albanese, because I think a lot of people expected him to get beaten. One thing is for certain, and that is that our Prime Minister is a brilliant debater. Now, being a debater is not the only thing you need, the only quality that you need to be a great Prime Minister, but it sure as hell helps. And so to be able to come out even with someone like Morrison, I think is pretty good for Albo. So I'd say Albo at least held his own, and I didn't expect him to.
Peter Credlin, the two leaders did use the techniques that we've come to know in the people's forums by trying to embrace the questioner by using their names, listening, asking for a bit more detail. Was that human side done effectively in your view?
I think it was. I think it's well practiced. We know Albanese spent, days and days preparing for this, as he should, particularly after the events of last week. I think the Prime Minister being out on the hustings, I mean, that point about batteries, the bloke says, why don't we make batteries here? Albanese talks about making batteries here. Then Morrison says, well, actually, I've turned to sod at a place in Newcastle that is making batteries. So the fact that he's out on the ground, in the nature of a Prime Minister's job, getting out about and visiting, he was able to have all of those personal examples. I think Albanese, again, using the story about the Housing Commission at the very front of the program, all designed to elicit an emotional response. I think politicians are getting better and better and better, Kieran, at this format, and it shows.
Andrew Clennell, you were here in the room, and you could see that, and the viewers at home know, we've been saying it over many days, years in fact, we don't tell them how to say it, what to say, in what format. It's completely unscripted. What did you think of the standard of the questions from the voters in the room?
Well, I thought that they were over a wide stream of areas. I was surprised there was so much on integrity. Housing affordability is always a good one. Bit surprised there wasn't a bit more cost of living in there, but I thought they were of good quality. Certainly one moment in here was when Scott Morrison went fully on the attack on China. There was kind of an audible groan or moan in the room when he said, why is Labor on the side of China, which was a bit of a feature as well. Always hard, Kieran, for governments in these situations, the leader who's been in charge, because he's got his whole record in government that you can hit him with. And what Peter was saying earlier, some of those questions like on the NDIS and how they've cut back there, you're just going to have to wear that as a PM. But because he's not in front, he's kind of tying with Albanese on the primary vote at the moment, or the coalition is with Labor. He has to take these debate opportunities, Morrison. And I would argue because Albanese's not a mile in front, he has to as well. I must say at the end of the debate, I was hungry for more. I was hungry for more viewer questions. I'm already ready for the next People's Forum if we can have one, because I think there's more questions to be thrown at these leaders, particularly in the absence of a big forward-leaning agenda from either of them. And I would like to see that. I also thought it was interesting that Albanese, and this was a bit risky, defended the record of the Rudd-Gillard government, said Labor was big on reform, and that's very true. Both sides have had big reforms over the years, yet he's not proposing any sort of major reform. So that was interesting to see him defend that government.
I just was saying there, I'm surprised the Prime Minister didn't jump in there. I think he let him get away with that. I think that was too much too far. And I also think too, you know, these forums aren't stacked like the National Press Club. The questions were real questions, and I think that's the refreshing difference.
Andrew Bolt, one of the question that is in my memory after speaking to various people tonight, Catherine, the very personal story about young Ethan, it has that resonance that a question, as Peter says, at a news conference, press club, they just don't have. You can't dodge a question from a mother with that clear love that she's expressing for her son. It's the beauty of this format, I think, Andrew.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. I thought their questions actually were very intelligent. It was an excellent debate, the kind of thing that I think we need to see far, far more of, because it was going past the talking points to getting into substantive issues. Now, on that particular question, the Prime Minister was never going to win that. I mean, you get assessments of various cases in the NDIS, there's thousands of them. Some people are going to get cut back, some people are going to get more money. What are you going to say? You can't say, well, maybe you didn't deserve it. So, you know, he was always going to cop that one. But I thought the exchange for me that really summed up where the two candidates need to have a think about things, particularly the Liberal side, was where Albanese pointed out, with the Prime Minister's own help, the Prime Minister actually said, you know, give credit to the Labor Party for the NDIS, and I give credit to Julia Gillard, and I give credit to Bill Shorten, where then Albanese sees on it, we are the party, the big ideas, the NDIS, the pharmaceutical benefits scheme, you know, things like that, and the Hawke-Keating reforms, and all those sort of things. And the comeback from the Prime Minister was, yes, but we're the ones who then have to fund it. So I think really you've got back to the stereotypes where you've got the Labor Party promising the future and the Liberals saying, but what about the money? But having no alternative agenda. The Prime Minister needs, I think, to develop a story about the future. We never heard it. It's all about a story about what he's done, and that gives you an idea that at least he's in charge of the detail. But what was the story of the future? He's going to have to fill that in.
Yeah, well, we saw recently, didn't we, Richo, the power of a vision out of the South Australian election, if we go back to Malinowskis, and that vision that he spoke of, it was very compelling at the ballot box. It worked for him. Richo, where to from now? I guess, as you alluded to, and Andrew did as well, it could have ended Albanese's campaign tonight. It hasn't. So where to from now as he seeks to move on and regroup?
Well, you've got both of them are pretty level in the polls in terms of personal popularity, and also in terms of the numbers who don't like them. So I'd say at the moment, Alba would be pretty happy with tonight. I think a lot of people doubted his capacity to get through tonight. I know there were quite a few people in the Labor Party who were worried about it. But when you look at the finished product, he did very well. And so I'd say Albo's the winner, at least in terms of his own performance. You know, he's won me because he did a lot better, basically, than I thought he would. I thought it was a pretty big night for him. I knew Scott would go well. Scott Morrison's one of the best political debaters I've ever seen, and I've been looking at this business closely for 50 years. Morrison's no bug. So for Albo to come out even with him, that's a pretty good effort.